Now, do you want to get to some production? I would love to see the stems. I'd like to see how you
Yeah,
cook, I guess, in more.
for sure. Yeah, so the first beat I wanted to play for everybody. I consider this my favorite beat that
Mhm.
I've ever made ever. And there's a very specific story behind it.
Yeah.
The beat is called Golden Touch,
Mhm.
and it's a beat that's off of one of my beat tapes, Just Add Rain Volume 3, which I put out in 2021.
Mhm.
And this beat I made live on stream, as I did with most of the beats. But this particular beat, the reason it's my favorite is because this is a beat that I made the same day that I was diagnosed with combat related PTSD. So
Oh.
like emotions were very high that
Mhm.
day. I had like a meltdown when I was diagnosed. So I came back to the studio, started up the stream, and I was just like, let me not waste these feelings, I
Mhm.
have to get this out. And I was kind of going through records, and this record, I'll pull the record right here. But
Sure.
I got this record right here. Um, and it's a Rolls Royce record. It is called Golden Touch. It is actually the title track. It's a 50 Cent record, but when I heard the lyrics to the intro, it says, Golden Touch, do you know the power that you possess, right?
Mhm.
So at that time I was feeling very low, and I was very like unsure of myself, and on the verge of like severe depression and whatnot. And I was just like, those bars spoke to me. And the way that I kind of flipped it, I try to make it feel like how I feel those sentiments are from me. So as you listen to this track, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I'll just play it here for you. You'll
Yeah.
notice
Would love to hear
the
it.
drum, yeah, the drums are super sloppy. Um, Everything is meant to feel like how I was feeling at that time. And
Mhm.
I'll kind of break it down more after it plays here.
Awesome.
Golden touch, do you know the power you possess? You're the key
Wow. Man, that had so much movement and
Yeah.
how it changed over time.
Hmm.
Kind of you telling me that story really made me feel like I was with you that day. I think a lot of
Yeah,
people in the chat too were with you on that day too,
they were. Yeah.
which is extra powerful. I think, it was an experience, I gotta say. I also liked what you said before because I did notice that the drums were a bit slightly off, which is,
Yeah.
in this instance, I think a good thing because
Hmm.
you know how in production, a lot of people like to quantize, a lot of people like to make it
Right.
straight and make it fit, right? The
Yeah.
fact that this doesn't fit, like you could make it fit if you wanted to, but the fact
Right.
that you just let it go is like very, very human sounding, if that makes any
Right.
sense. But
Yeah.
I would love to know, for especially anybody that wasn't there watching you make this, what did you start with? I know you pulled that sample from that
Yeah.
record. From there, because I've seen your videos and I know when you're
Yeah.
hearing a sample, you start to think of beats in your mind and ways
Hmm.
to jump on that. How
Yeah.
did you attack this? How did you jump at it at first? And also, there's so many different parts of it that I want to
Yeah.
talk through, but let's start with the
Yeah.
beginning because that's
Yeah.
how you
Yeah.
started.
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing that I started with was the sample.
Mhm.
I heard like multiple different things, like the chorus where, she's singing Golden Touch.
Yeah.
Um, it was just kind of like, it was my way of saying like, people are always telling me like, yo, your beats are so dope, like you're so good, this and this and that. I get a lot of compliments, right?
Mhm.
And you know, I love that and I appreciate them. But during that time, I didn't feel like I was deserving of any of praise or adoration.
Mhm.
Which is why I kind of filtered her voice to be like super distant because I
Mhm.
felt so far
Mhm.
away from that sentiment.
Yep.
So I put that way off in the distance, and then the strings too. Like the something about those strings had like had a very hopeful tone to them,
Yeah, I
and
agree.
I was like at that time I was feeling hopeless. So I also kind of made the strings sound like hope was far away, kind of thing. And then when I started programming the drums,
Mhm.
I wanted it to be sloppy because and just off beat because that's literally how in my mind and my heart that's how I felt at the time. Like I just felt like something was off with me, which was the reason why I reached out for help in
Mhm.
the first place. And I started getting help for mental health.
Yeah.
Um so I just felt off beat all the time.
Mm.
I just wasn't going out. I was isolated from my friends and my family, and I just knew something was up. So I had to have the beat kind of be off to kind of match that um just that off timing.
Mhm.
And then with the guitars, like the way that I chopped the guitars, I just liked how it had this very melancholy kind of tone to it.
Mhm.
And I decided to chop it the way that I did because just I just felt like this cycle was just never ending, dealing with my PTSD, recurring nightmares, things like that. It was just a never ending cycle. So it just
Mhm.
kept repeating. So I was like, let me just repeat these chords, like,
Mhm.
because that's how it feels. It's just everything's just dun 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 dun
Mhm.
dun. Um, and then after the start of the second verse, um there's like that little glimmer of hope, like those strings and the synths
Right.
come in,
Mhm.
and there's like that little glimmer of hope, which was
Yep.
like kind of my way of like musically like reaching out for help, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
then comes back to the main like guitar loop, the
Yeah.
same guitar chop and everything, because
Mhm.
during that time, at that time, like, yeah, I'm reaching out for help, and I started the first step is like actually reaching out. And but then it's just like come back home, come back to my little hideout, my studio, and it's like the same thing over and over and over again.
Mhm.
So yeah, that beat is, I know it sounds like a lot of layers and stuff, but it was just really me being raw
Mhm.
at that time. Like I just wanted to really get those emotions out because I just didn't know any other way to like channel it.
Yeah. I do like at a point that you talked about the You know, at the beginning, the bass was really prevalent, and kind of in
Hmm.
the middle, near the end, the highs were also really,
Yeah.
really intense. Um, that kind of gives that feeling of, you know, reaching out for help, as you were saying, but
Yep.
it's like uplifting, I guess, towards the end.
Right.
Now, for someone that creates, for someone that, as you said, who is struggling with melodies and kind
Yeah.
of ways to put in the highs, what did you
Yeah.
work with on this one? You know, because I know you probably have a crazy sample pack for drums and bass lines and all that stuff, but for
Hmm.
the highs specifically, what sounds jumped out to you for those, and why did you pick the ones you picked?
It was the guitar,
Hmm.
sound, and then also the synth. Like
Hmm.
when the synth came in on the at the start of the second verse, that that synth just made me feel some type of way.
Hmm.
As soon as I heard it, I was just like, "Oh, that sounds like hey, it sounds like almost like a light, at the end of the tunnel."
Hmm.
So um that's what I kind of treated it as. Like, here's like a momentary peek at like, hey, there's an outlet, there's a solution here,
Hmm.
there's like a little light at the end of the tunnel there.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's really what kind of stood out to me as far as like the highs are concerned. It was mostly like the guitar, the strings, and that synth.
Hmm.
It was just three different elements that spoke to the myriad of emotions that I was feeling at that time.
And it seemed like, from what you said, that you finished this rather quickly, uh,
Mhm.
and you just sat down after hearing that news and just took it all out.
Yeah.
And afterwards, how did you feel? A more personal question, but how did you feel after you had finished this and maybe tinkered with it a little bit? But at the end of this creation,
Mhm.
what did you feel?
A little bit of relief,
Hmm.
because it was just like I said, it was just raw. Everything just came out, and I got so locked in. I don't think I even talked that much during the making of this beat, but
Hmm.
I just kind of showed people like, layer by layer, how I was doing everything. Um, and it just, the way that it came out at the end, I was just like, this is it. Like, this is how I feel.
Hmm.
Like, this perfectly captures that moment in time for me. So that's why it's my favorite, because it did kind of kickstart my journey, of trying to heal, mental health issues and whatnot.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I also just sonically, I'm just very like, it takes me back to that day, but also to know like how far I've come since then, not only with my music, but also my mental health and my relationships with people. Um, it's a good reminder, you know what I mean? That's why I hold that particular beat near and dear to my heart.
Yeah. And to break it down a little further here
Mhm.
too, um, can you take me through the just the drums? Could you take me through
Mhm.
the? Could you isolate the track potentially?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can definitely do that.
Cool.
Let me switch here. So the drums.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the trailing
Yeah.
kind of beat that you made here.
So it has like a very simple like two-step
Mm-hmm.
groove to it,
Yeah.
with a little variation at the end there. But the main thing that kind of carries that offness of the drum is that hi-hat. And
Yep.
I purposely did the hi-hats
Mm-hmm.
in that way, to throw the groove off just a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
like it, I think, like it to the point where it still fits, but there's definitely like a noticeable offness to it,
Mm-hmm.
um so yeah, that's basically how I approached the drums. I wanted something to like knock. I needed something
Mm-hmm.
to really hit.
Yeah.
um and yeah, I just kept it very simple, and the concept for it was very simple as well. It's
Mm-hmm.
just two step, like you're just walking this path, and
Mm-hmm.
then just that the timing of the hi-hats being off just kind of lends itself to that offness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like how you approach things, or at least this song. I like how you really approach it conceptually more than you do kind of instrumentally, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Would you say that's how you approach most of the beats you make, in kind of a mindset of, okay, I want this to be this emotion, or I want this to be like this, rather than, oh, these drums sound good, I'm gonna do this with them?
For the most part,
Mhm.
I do try to take all of those things into consideration. But then there's that other side of me where it's just like, I just want this beat to take somebody's head off. Like, I want them to play this in their car and they just almost swerve off the road
Mhm.
because they're like headbanging so much, you know? So I have that dichotomy,
Yeah.
those both sides of me, where I
Mhm.
can get really deep and really introspective through my music.
Mhm.
But then other times, you know, because I grew up in the battle scene, like beat battles, like where you actually had to do them live in front of people and not just online.
Jeez.
So yeah, so like that kind of mentality and that approach still, it's still in there, you know. So I still have those moments where I'm like, nah, this is like, I hear a record and I'm like, this has to knock somebody's head off immediately, you know, like I'm coming for heads.
Coming for heads.
Yeah.
Um, with that, I do want to ask you one more thing about this track, and then maybe we can
Yeah.
check out another one too.
Sure.
I want to ask you a bit about the sample and kind of the journey that the sample took, because you spoke about there being some filtration at one point and making it sound like it's distant at a
Yeah.
certain point. And I know there was a lot of I don't know what to call them. Maybe I don't have the exact jargon, but like the phase in and phase out of it all too.
Yeah.
I would love to break down how you did that and how you kind of mixed it up with that sample.
Yeah. So for that effect,
Hmm.
I used a reverb
Hmm.
for that. So
Right.
this one, so yeah, I used a Renaissance verb for those vocals and for the
Hmm.
strings. And I was just like, let me make it sound like it's like this huge hall and make it like
Yeah.
very, I wanted it to be like super wet. So it just had like this trailing effect,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
and just to make it feel even way further away. So yeah, like that was really the thinking behind it. Was I just wanted to kind of layer that on top of the main guitar loop, have the strings also layered on top of that
Hmm.
along with the vocal. um because the hopeful parts of the song, I wanted it to feel like far. I just wanted it to feel like it was like this distant thing,
Hmm.
because that's how far I felt from those
Hmm.
sentiments, you know. I didn't feel hopeful at that time. I didn't feel like there was light at the end of the tunnel during that time.
Hmm.
I was in a really like bad spot, like getting diagnosed in this way. It just spoke to me and to my heart to like set it up that way and to EQ it in that way.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I want to move on
Yeah.
to another track that you got prepared for us today too.
Yes.
Would love to hear the kind of story and method behind this one too.